Thank you for coming, and thank you for the invitation to be with you this morning, this afternoon.
Hvala vam što ste me pozvali i hvala vam što mogu biti sa vama ovog prepodneva, popodneva.
I'm going to talk with you about a promise that God has given to us, and that was given to us in Exodus chapter 15, verse 26.
Volio bih da pričam sa vama o jednom obećanju koje nam je Bog dao u prvom Mojsijevom, a drugom Mojsijevom 15:26.
The situation was that the children of Israel had just been through the Red Sea experience.
Izraelci su prošli kroz Crveno more.
And Moses was trying to bring some order out of the chaos that was evident in the camp.
I Mojsije je teo da izvede naroda iz haosa.
And in Exodus 15:26,
druga Mojsijeva 15:26 kaže,
God said, "If you listen carefully to the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commands and keep all his decrees, I will not bring any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you."
I reče, ako dobro zaslušaš glas Gospoda Boga svojeg i učiniš što je pravo u očima njegovem, i ako prigneš uho k zapovestima njegovim i ušuvaš sve uredbe njegove, nijedne bolesti koje sam pustio na Misir neću pustiti na tebe, jer sam ja Gospod, lekar tvoj.
So a question that we can ask is, what does God require of us to fulfill this promise?
Pitanje je šta Bog očekuje od nas da bi ispunio ovo obećanje.
What commands and what decrees do we have to pay attention to?
Na koje zapovesti moramo da obratimo pažnju?
Well, I think as a beginning of an answer to that, let's go to Genesis chapter 1.
Kao početak odgovora, neko odemo u prvo Mojsijevo, prvo poglavlje.
And in verse 26, God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness."
I u 26. stihu kaže, potom reče Bog da načinimo čoveka po svojem obličju, kao što smo mi.
The impact of sin has changed our appearance.
Uticaj greha je promenio naše roditelje.
Do we still reflect God and his image?
Da li mi i dalje ličimo na Boga, na njegovu sliku?
And are there things that we can do to help to maintain the image that God has given to us?
I stvar na koju moramo obratiti pažnju, kako da održavamo tu sliku koju nam je Bog dao.
When I was young, I lived in a community and that there were a lot of smokers.
Kada sam ja bio mlad, živao sam u okruženju gde je bilo mnogo pušača.
These people had smoked from the very earliest age.
Ovi ljudi su pušili od veoma ranih godina.
And so when they were 40 years old,
kada su imali 40 godina,
they looked as though they were 80 or 90 years old.
Činilo se da imaju 80-90 godina.
So this is an example of how sin can change our appearance.
Ovo je primjer kako greh može da promeni naše roditelje.
And so the image of God,
izgled roditelja. Naš.
So the image of God is severely tarnished by our sin and not following God's instructions regarding health, for example.
I na taj način slika Božja koja bi trebala da bude u nama je how did you say it? The image of God?
In the image of God. Is the image of God severely tarnished by our sin?
Da li je slika Božja oštećena u nama?
And so a question I would ask is, are we in the same condition as these smokers in God's eye as a result of our sin?
I postavljam pitanje da li smo mi u istom stanju kao što su pušači u Božjim očima, naravno.
Another place that we can go for instructions is continuation right where we were in Genesis.
Još jedno mesto gdje možemo naći objašnjenje u prvom Mojsijevom.
In Genesis 1:29.
U prvom poglavlju 29. stihu.
God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food.
I još reče Bog, evo dao sam vam sve bilje što nosi seme po svojoj zemlji i dva drveta rodna koje nose seme, to će vam biti za hranu.
So remember that this was the diet that God gave to us before sin entered the earth.
Znači, zapamtite da je ovo bila ishrana koju nam je Bog dao pre nego što smo pali u greh.
After Adam and Eve sinned, God gave further instructions regarding diet.
Kada Adam i Eva su pali u greh, Bog je dao dalja uputstva što se tiče ishrane.
And this is in Genesis 3, verse 18.
A ovo je u 3. poglavlju, 18. stihu.
And so in addition to the food that he had given to us before, he says, you will eat the plants of the field.
I pored toga što nam je dao na početku, rekao je da ćemo jesti biljke sa zemlje.
So that original diet now was supplemented with leaves, stems, and roots.
Tako da prethodna ishrana je bila dopunjena sa lišćem, sa korenom i sa... Šta je?
Leaves and stems and...
Stems. Šta je to? Stablo. Ok, razumeli ste.
We know that as man continued to grow and to develop through the pre-flood time, they became more and more wicked.
Znate, kao kada idemo prema potopu u vremenu, čovječanstvo je postalo sve gori i gori, sve zli.
And so that's one of the reasons why God brought the flood upon the earth.
I to je jedan od razloga zašto je Bog doveo potop na zemlju.
But he also vowed that he was going to decrease the length of life of man.
Could you repeat it?
He was going to, Adam and Methuselah lived almost 1,000 years.
Okay. I također je smanjio broj godina koliko su ljudi živjeli, životni vek.
But after the flood, he changed the diet once again.
Ali posle potopa on je promenio ishranu opet.
And this is found in Genesis 9, verse 3.
Prvo Mojsijevo 9, 3. stih.
And here God says, everything that lives and moves will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything.
Što se god miče i živi, neka vam bude za jelo, sve vam to dadoh kao zelenu travu.
And as a result of this, man's life was shortened.
I kao rezultat toga, ljudski život je bio skraćen.
And so by the time we got to Abraham, what did he live? About 120 years.
I dok stignemo do Avrama, koliko je on živo? 120 godina.
So in today's environment, there's a lot of interest in seeing what we can do to increase our length of life.
I u današnjem svetu mi se trudimo da mi povećamo naš životni vek.
This year, 2013, marks the 150th anniversary of the vision that Ellen White had about health.
Ove godine je 150. godišnjica vizije koju je Ellen White imala o zdravlju.
And she has given us a number of instructions from God regarding how we can live more healthfully.
Ona nam je dala uputstva koje je ona dobila od Boga kako mi možemo živjeti duže.
And so with the intent that we would live longer.
Iako to sve ispunimo, ona upusa koje je ona dala, mi ćemo živjeti duže.
Do you have any idea what the length of life, the average length of life was in 1863, 150 years ago?
Da li znate koji je bio životni vek, znači prosek u 1863. godini?
50? A little bit lower than that. Lower than 50. A little bit lower than 40. 39.7 years, something along that line.
39,7 godina.
And there was a great deal of instruction given so that we could live. What was happening is that young ministers were trained, they lived for a few years and died.
Što se događalo da mladi propovednici, oni koji su htjeli da šire evanđelje, su bili podučeni, malo su radili pa su umreli.
And so Seventh-day Adventists have been recognized as leaders in longevity.
I tako adventisti 7. dana su bili prepoznati kao vođa u zdravlju, življenje duže.
And we'll talk about that in just a little bit.
I pričat ćemo o tome malo.
But a question that I would like to ask is longevity, a long life, our objective in being Seventh-day Adventists?
Da li je dugoročni život being objective?
Is that what we're here for, is just to live a long life?
Da li smo adventisti samo zbog toga da bismo živeli duži život?
I think we could give an answer of yes and no.
Možemo dati odgovor da i ne.
Does that make sense?
Jel to ima smisla?
Let's try to unpack that a little bit.
Malo da otpakujemo to.
I think no, from the point of view that God has already promised us eternal life.
Kažem ne iz perspektive da nam je Bog već pre obećao večni život.
And the emphasis that many people outside of the Seventh-day Adventist Church are placing on longevity. Why don't you go ahead?
Just continue.
This emphasis is saying to others that I don't need a God. I can do it all myself, just through lifestyle changes that I can make.
Znači, ljudi koji su van adventističke crkve kažu da meni nije potreban Bog, ja mogu da promenim svoj život i sve će biti okej.
And I think that can be a danger.
I to može biti i opasnost.
But we can also give it a yes answer.
Također možemo dati odgovor da.
In that we can be more efficient, have greater efficiency in accomplishing God's work.
I ovdje možemo biti efikasniji u Božjem delu.
So a longer lifespan can result in more being accomplished.
Duži život. Help please. Da, to.
Okay. I think that many of you are familiar with the term New Start.
Mnogi od vas ste sigurno čuli o programu New Start.
This is a list of 8 natural remedies that God has given us through Ellen White so that we can live longer.
Ovo je 8 preporučenih stvari koje nam je Bog dao kroz Ellen White. Ako to živimo, bit će dobro.
But not just a longer life, but a longer, more productive, more spiritual life.
Živjet ćemo duže i ne samo da ćemo živjeti duže, već ćemo imati bolji duhovni život.
And I would like to suggest that when we apply nutrition, exercise, water, sunshine and temperance, air, rest, and divine power, we not only improve our health, but we also improve our spiritual health.
I kada mi Znači imamo u našem životu i vodu, i vežbu, ishranu, i sunce, umerenost, vazduh, odmor i vera u Boga, onda ćemo biti duhovno zdraviji.
And so as we adopt these principles into our lives, we are helping to restore the image of God.
I kako prisvajamo ove principe u naš život, mi u stvari vraćamo našu sliku na sliku Boga. Trudimo se da naša slika bude bolja.
Recently there was an article in a major news magazine in this world.
Pre izvesno vreme izašao je članak u jednom popularnom magazinu.
And it was asking the question, do you want to live a long life?
I postavili su pitanje tamo, da li biste vi voljeli da živite duži život?
And the response was, live like a Seventh-day Adventist.
I odgovor je bio, živite kao adventista 7. dana.
So the world is looking to us as some examples of how they can live longer and be more helpful.
Tako da svet gleda na nas kao na primer kako mogu živjeti dugačak život.
I would like to share with you some research studies that have been done.
Volio bih da podelim sa vama jedno istraživanje koje sam uradio.
Particularly in the area of health.
Na polju zdravlja.
The first study was a longevity study that was conducted at Loma Linda University in the late 1950s.
Jedno istraživanje što se tiče dužeg života sam napravio na Loma Linda univerzitetu 1950. godina.
There were two primary objectives of this research.
Tu su bilo dva predmeta ovog istraživanja.
The first question was, do Seventh-day Adventist men and women live longer than the average citizen of California?
Znači, prvo pitanje je bilo da li muškarci i žene koji su članovi adventiste 7. dana žive duže nego prosječan kalifornijski čovjek.
And if so, what are the factors that create the longer life?
Iako to zaista stoji, koji su faktori koji utiču na to, na duži život?
So to answer the first question,
da bismo odgovorili na prvo pitanje,
they found that Adventist men in the state of California live 6.2 years longer than the average California male.
Jedan adventista živi 6,2 godine duže nego prosek u Kaliforniji.
And on the other hand, Seventh-day Adventist women live 3.7 years longer than the average California woman.
A adventističke žene žive 3,7 godina duže od proseka.
This study concluded in about 1966.
Sorry?
This longevity study ended in about 1966.
Ovo istraživanje je bilo završeno 1966. godine.
And it ended without answering the second question, what are the factors that create this longer life?
I to se završilo bez toga da bismo odgovorili na drugo pitanje, koji su faktori koji utiču na duži život.
So in 1974, a new study was begun, which was called the Adventist Health Study.
I tako 1974. godine jedno novo istraživanje je bilo pokrenuto o adventističkom zdravlju.
And the results of this study were published shortly after it ended in 1988.
I završetak ovog istraživanja se završilo 1988. godine.
And so the findings of this Adventist health study include the following information.
I rezultate ovog istraživanja uključuju sljedeće informacije.
Now they find that Adventist men live 7.3 years longer than the average California male.
A sada su otkrili da adventisti, znači muškarci, žive 7,3 godine duže nego prosječni čovjek iz Kalifornije.
And Adventist women live 4.4 years longer.
I žene koje su adventisti žive 4,4 godine duže nego prosjek.
This difference is really due to statistics. The difference between the longevity study and the years and this is because of statistical analysis. The primary factor was the fact that they included more people in the study.
Znači, bilo je ovdje ovaj put uključeno više ljudi u istraživanje.
They also found that an increased consumption of red and white meat is associated with an increased risk of colon cancer.
I otkrili su da konzumiranje crvenog i belog mesa povećava mogućnost kolon raka.
This was a very strong finding, statistically significant.
Ovo je bilo jedno jako otkriće.
Likewise, eating legumes, beans, for example, is associated with protection against colon cancer.
Također, ako jedemo lagunina, kao boranije, pasulj, znači, ne znam te stručne nazive, onda smo zaštićeni od raka.
Another finding was that consumption of nuts, eating nuts 4 or 5 times a week, reduced the risk of heart attack by 50%.
Također, ako jedemo orašaste plodove, onda možemo smanjiti mogućnost srčanog udara sa 50%.
How many of you eat nuts on a regular basis?
Koliko od vas jedete orašaste plodove?
So the result that you could expect would be a reduced risk of coronary heart disease and heart attack.
Ako to činite, onda 50% vam se smanjuje mogućnost da dobijete srčani udar.
In order to reduce the risk of heart attack even further, changing from white bread to whole wheat bread reduced non-fatal heart attack risk by 45%.
Također, ako jedete crni hleb umjesto belog hleba, onda ste smanjili srčani udar, koji nije fatalan, ali opet srčani udar sa 45%.
And drinking 5 or more cups of water every day reduce the risk of heart disease by 50%.
Ako pijete 5 ili više čaša vode svaki dan, to smanjuje mogućnost srčanog udara sa 50%.
So making these simple changes in our lives can result in longer life, disease free.
Ako mi primenimo ove sitnice u našem životu, može itekako da smanjuje mogućnost ovih bolesti, raka i srčnog udara.
And men who had a high tomato consumption demonstrated a reduced risk of prostate cancer by 40%.
Ljudi koji su konzumirali mnogo paradajza, oni su smanjili rizik prostate. Kako? Rak prostate sa 40%.
Drinking soy milk more than once a day will result in a 70% reduction in prostate cancer.
Ako pijete sojino mlijeko svaki dan, onda možete smanjiti rizik prostate 70%.
This is just a very tiny sample of what has been found in Adventist Health Study 1.
Ovo je samo primjer šta je bilo pronađeno, otkriveno u adventističkom zdravstvenom istraživanju. Prvi deo.
So the recommendations from Adventist Health Study 1 include the following 5 points.
I koji su predlogi adventističkog zdravstvenog istraživanja su sljedeći.
Not smoking.
Nemojte pušiti.
Eating a plant diet.
Dakle, jedite znači biljnu ishranu konzumirajte.
Eating nuts frequently throughout the week.
Jedite orašaste plodove nekoliko puta sedmično.
Regular exercise.
Redovno vežbajte.
And I'm not talking about vigorous exercise, I'm talking about just moving, like walking.
I ne govorim tu o većim vežbama, nego samo šetnja ili tako nešto.
And the fifth one is to maintain appropriate body weight.
Peto je da održavamo neku normalnu težinu.
Currently, Adventist Health Study number 2 is being conducted.
Trenutno, adventističko zdravstveno istraživanje je sad u toku, znači drugi deo, broj 2.
Rather than just looking at men and women in the state of California,
umjesto da gledaju samo muškarce i žene samo u Kaliforniji,
we're looking at Seventh-day Adventists across the country.
Mi gledamo na adventiste u državi.
And particularly looking at the differences between black and white people and other races.
They're not looking at the differences.
They are looking at that to see if there are differences.
Znači, gledaju na razlike između belce i crnce i ostalih rasa.
A little while ago we were talking about longevity.
Malo pre smo pričali o dugom životu.
And so application of what we have just learned in terms of the Adventist Health Study will increase our length of life.
Iako mi primenimo to što nam adventističko zdravstveno istraživanje preporučuje, onda ćemo produžiti naš život.
But there are individuals, as I indicated, who are not Christian, who are not religious, but are still looking for an increased length of life.
Postoje ljudi koji nisu adventisti, nisu hrišćani i opet traže za dužem životom. And
I think one of the forces behind this was an article that was written in National Geographic magazine in November of 2005.
And that was, what was the first sentence?
It was an article written in the National Geographic magazine has resulted in increased attention being paid to a longer lifespan.
Znači, to što je povećalo pažnju na duži život je bio jedan članak u National Geographic magazinu u novembru 2005. godine.
The article was written by Dan Buettner.
Ovaj članak je bio napisan Dan Buettner ga je napisao.
He studied areas of this earth that were noted for a longer lifespan.
Could you repeat that sentence, please?
He studied areas in this world that experienced a longer lifespan naturally.
Znači, proučavao je delove sveta gde su ljudi imali duži život.
When I was younger in college, Hunza was the major area of the world that we associated with a longer lifespan.
Kada sam ja radio istraživanje, mi smo uzeli zemlju Hanza, gde su ljudi živeli malo duže nego prosek.
And so Dan Buettner in his research found 3 areas where people lived to be over 100 years old.
I tako je ovaj čovek Dan je našao 3 lokacije gde su ljudi živeli preko 100 godina.
Had a fraction of the diseases that were found in other parts of the area.
What's the fraction?
Had a fraction of the diseases, very small percentage of the diseases that people around them experienced.
Može malo. Pa dobro, neko da prevede ovu rečenicu, mislim, ja ne znam što je frakcija.
Frakcije bolesti koji su postojali na druge lokacije nisu se našli tamo.
Znači, frakcija bolesti koji su postojali na drugim lokacijama nisu se snašli tamo. Hvala.
The 3 areas that Dan Buettner identified are the island of Sardinia in the Mediterranean.
Znači, 3 lokacije koje je pronašao ovaj čovek je Sardinija, znači jedno ostrvo kod Italije.
The island of Okinawa in the Pacific Ocean.
Ostrvo Okinawa pored Japana.
And essentially an island in Southern California called Loma Linda. Loma Linda, California, USA.
I jedno ostrvo koje je nazvano Loma Linda, Kalifornija u Sjedinjenim Američkim Državama.
Loma Linda is not really an island,
Loma Linda u stvari nije ostrvo,
but it is surrounded by people who have very poor health outcomes.
ali je okružen sa ljudima koji imaju jako retko oboljenje.
And I think that we have an obligation to help them to improve their health and longevity as well.
I mi imamo obligaciju da im pomognemo da povećaju svoj životni vek.
Let's briefly look at some of the characteristics that are shared between these three locations.
Da vidimo karakteristike koji su podeljeni među ovim lokacijama.
Number one is that they put their families ahead of any of their other concerns.
Prva stvar je da oni stavljaju porodicu na prvo mesto.
So the family was central to their life.
Porodica je bila nešto centralno u njihovom životu.
They did not smoke. Number two.
Broj 2, nisu pušili.
Number three, they had a plant diet.
Imali su biljnu ishranu.
Number four was that they had a consistent level of moderate physical activity.
Broj 4, imali su konstantnu fizičku aktivnost.
This physical activity was not going to the gym and using treadmills and other bodybuilding machines.
Ova fizička aktivnost ne podrazumeva da su otišli u teretanu i koristili su razne sprave za vežbanje, nego obično kretanje.
But it was the activities associated with living day by day.
Nego to su bili aktivnosti koje su oni radili dok su živeli svaki dan.
And the fifth and final observation was social engagement.
Peta stvar je društvenost.
Specifically, people were socially active and integrated into their communities.
Ljudi su bili društveno aktivni, bili su integrisani u svoje okruženje.
So, in the article that was written, Seventh-day Adventists were particularly noted for church attendance, and that was the integration socially into the community.
Kada je ovaj članak bio napisan, adventisti su bili spomenuti, pošto, kao što znamo, idemo u crkvu i na taj način smo društveno uključeni aktivno u zajednicu.
I want to tell you about a friend that I have in Loma Linda.
Da vam kažem nešto o mom prijatelju iz Loma Linde.
He looks as though he may be 80.
Izgleda kao da ima 80 godina.
He's really 102.
A u stvari on ima 102 godina.
He follows these 5 things that we just talked about.
On slijedi ovih 5 stvari koje smo malo pre spomenuli.
He lives alone. His wife has died.
On živi, njegova žena je umrela.
But he is always in church.
Ali uvijek u crkvi.
He has a wonderful sense of humor.
Ima fantastičnu smisao za humor.
And so I have a really good time with him.
Imam zaista divno vreme s njim.
His name is Herb Wiles.
A njegovo ime je Herb Wiles.
And he has been a pastor and literature evangelist.
I on je bio pastor i vodio crkvu.
His birthday is February 9.
Njegov rođendan je 9. februara.
And so on February 9, on the year 2012, he went to the driver's license bureau to renew his driver's license.
I 9. februara 2012. godine on je otišao da produži vozačku dozvolu.
What did the driver's license bureau do to him?
A šta su oni njemu učinili?
They renewed his driver's license for 5 years.
Oni su mu produžili vozačku dozvolu 5 godina.
So I think that is a good example of the results of good living throughout your life.
I to je jako dobar primjer da živite tako.
I would like to summarize what has been found as further study into the blue zones has indicated to us.
Volio bih da kraćeno da vam prikažem šta je bilo još what was blue zone.
Additional research has found the following things that we're going to talk about.
Aha, znači tokom dalje istraživanja sljedeće stvari su bili otkrivene.
But before that, I would like to go and do one other thing.
Ali pre toga volio bih da pogledamo dve stvari.
And that is to indicate that, yes, Loma Linda was indicated as a blue zone.
Prva stvar je da Loma Linda je bila, I don't know what's a blue zone.
It's just a name.
Plava zona.
It's an area that has these characteristics.
Okay, like these characters.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Znači, blue zone je kao zona gdje se primjenjuju ove karakteristike, i Loma Linda je jedno mjesto od njih.
I do not think that it is anything about Loma Linda in terms of longer life. It's not just because you live in Loma Linda that you have a longer life.
Znači, to što živite u Loma Linda ne zavisi od da imate duži život.
I think it is because of the promises that God has given to us of a longer life and a more healthful life.
Tu su više u pitanju obećanja koje nam je Bog dao da bismo mi postigli duži život.
And so Belgrade, Serbia can be a blue zone as well.
Srbija može postati plava zona također.
Or wherever you live.
Ili gdje god živite.
And I really think that it applies to all Seventh-day Adventists.
I zaista smatram da se to odnosi na svakog od nas koji smo adventisti.
And not just people who live in Loma Linda.
A ne samo na ljude koji žive u Loma Lindi.
Because we all have this very similar characteristics and very similar lifestyle.
Jer svi imamo slične karakteristike i slične životne stilove.
And so the things that I would like for you to remember to take home.
I volio bi da zapamtite sljedeće stvari.
Is to remember these 9 things.
Da zapamtite ovih 9 stvari.
First one is just move.
Prva stvar je krećete. Da se krećete, da.
An active lifestyle is more important than heavy exercise.
Znači, aktivan životni stil je mnogo važniji nego vežbanje.
To produce this longer life and better health.
Da bismo imali duži životni vek i zdravi život.
The second is to have a purposeful outlook on life.
Druga stvar je da imamo jedan pogled na svet sa namerom.
And that's what my friend Herb Wiles has, in his sense of humor and his ability to be involved in what is happening in his community.
I to je to što moj prijatelj ima, znači smisao za humor i da bude uključeno u društvo.
The third area is to don't let stress get you down. Manage your stress.
Treća stvar je nemojte nikad dopustiti da vas stres slomi.
Another finding that he found is that suggests that we eat until we're 80% full.
Znači, četvrta stvar da jedemo dok smo napunjeni do 80%.
All we have to do is to look at the people around us.
Sve što moramo da radimo je da gledamo ljude oko nas.
At least in the United States.
Bar je tako u Sjedinjenim Američkim Državama.
Where there are so many people who are obese.
Gde su toliko ljudi koji su malo gojazni.
And they tend to overeat.
i koji jedu previše.
In our bodies we have a mechanism that tells us when we've had enough to eat.
I u našem telu postoji mehanizam koji nam kaže kada moramo prestati da jedemo.
But too many of us eat too quickly.
Ali mnogo od nas jedemo prebrzo.
And so the mechanism that tells us that we are full has a delayed effect.
I taj mehanizam koji nam kaže da smo puni, malo kasni.
So if we stop eating when we're at 80%,
Ako stanemo da jedemo kada smo puni 80%,
we're going to get the signal that we are really full. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes to really get that signal saying you've had enough to eat.
Znači treba 15-20 minuta dok ne dobijemo taj signal da si dosta jeo.
The fifth one is to follow a plant diet.
Peta stvar je da imamo biljnu ishranu.
And if you're not a vegetarian, which is fine, the important thing is to use meat as a condiment rather than the main element on your plate.
Iako niste vegetarijanci, to je ok, ali da meso ne bude glavno jelo, nego neki dodatak.
The next is to belong to a community.
Sljedeća stvar da pripadnete okruženju, jednom okruženju.
And specifically to a faith-based community.
I moramo naglasiti da to bude jedno versko okruženje.
Put your loved ones first.
Stavite na prvo mjesto one koje volite.
Focus on the family of your life and keeping your loved ones close.
Fokusirajte na vašu porodicu i učinite sve da vaši bližnji budu blizu vama.
And then have a circle of close friends, part of your community, and from number 1.
Imajte jedan krug bliskih prijatelja.
Who have the same values that you have in terms of wanting to live a healthy life.
Koji imaju iste vrednosti i koji se također trude da žive jedan zdrav život.
And to promote a healthy lifestyle.
I da na taj način promovišu zdrav život.
And so what you have then built in is a support group that will help you to follow the instruction that God has given.
I na taj način vi imate grupu koja vas podržava da bismo ispunili Božje zapovesti.
The ninth recommendation that Dan Buettner gives is one that I cannot support.
Deveta preporuka koju nam je ovaj pisač članka dao, koju ne podržavam.
Remember that the island of Sardinia is one of the blue zones on this earth.
Sjetite se da je Sardinija, ostrvo, je jedno od mesta koje je na ovoj plavoj zoni.
And one of the major products of Sardinia is wine.
I jedno od glavnih proizvoda je vino.
And so he has come to the conclusion that wine is an important part of long life.
I tako on zaključuje da je vino jedan veoma važna stvar u našem životu.
Well, when we study the importance of wine in long life, it's not really the wine.
Kada smo izučavali važnost vina, to u stvari nije važnost u vinu.
It's a phytochemical that is in the grape.
To je hemikalija koja se nalazi u grožđu.
Called resveratrol.
Koja se zove tako, resveratrol.
That is the active ingredient.
To je to što produžuje život.
And so that is found in fresh grapes. It is found in grape juice.
I to se nalazi u svežem grožđu i u soku od grožđa.
So rather than recommending the wine, recommend the grape juice and dried raisins or dried grapes like raisins.
I umjesto da preporučite vino, preporučujte sok od grožđa ili sveže grožđe.
And you will get the same result.
I dobit ćete iste rezultate.
That's something that I can support.
To je nešto što ja ne mogu podržavati.
One of the reasons that I do not support wine
I jedna od razloga zašto ja ne preporučujem vino,
besides what Ellen White has talked about avoiding wine,
je zato što Ellen White nas savjetuje da izbegnemo vino.
I've had too many of my friends killed in accidents, automobile accidents, involving a driver who has had too much alcohol.
Imam mnogo prijatelja koji su bili deo saobraćajne nesreće koji je prouzrokovao čovek koji je bio pod dejstvom alkohola.
By following these instructions, we do not have a guarantee that we're going to live to be 102 years old like Herb Wiles.
Ako mi pratimo ovih 9 stvari, to neće biti 100% sigurno da ćemo živjeti 102 godine.
But by following the instruction that God has given to us,
Ali ako pratimo instrukcije koje nam je Bog dao,
we will enjoy a life full of vitality,
onda ćemo uživati u životu koji je pun vitalnosti,
but not experiencing the diseases that are experienced by people around us.
I nećemo iskusiti bolesti koje ljudi oko nas iskusuju.
And so I think in what we need to do in preparation for the last days
I što moramo učiniti, što je preporuka za poslednje vreme,
is to understand these principles.
da razumemo ove principe.
Because people are going to come to us because they see that we do live a longer life and a more healthful life, and they're going to ask us, what are you doing that I'm not doing? How can I benefit from you?
Zato što ljudi će primetiti da živite duži život i onda će doći kod vas i pitaće šta treba da učinim, šta treba da menjam, što ja ne živim, hoću da živim to.
So one of the reasons that I am here in Serbia
Jedan razlog zbog čega sam ovde u Srbiji
is to consult with the union officials regarding the health clubs in this country.
Da konsultiram sa vođama zdravstvenih klubova koje i vi imate ovde u Srbiji.
And this is one of the ways in which we can share the promises that God has given to us with our communities.
I to je još jedan način da širimo obećanja koje nam je Gospod dao u našem okruženju.
I've been associated with the health clubs in Slovakia since about the year 2000, so about 13 years.
Bio sam...
I have been associated with the health clubs in Slovakia for the last 13 years.
Znači bilo sam povezan sa klubovima zdravlja iz Slovenije poslednjih 13 godina.
And it's an outstanding way to share these messages that God has given to us.
I to je izvanredan način da mi širimo obećanja koje nam je Bog dao.
So I wish you God's blessing as you further prepare for service.
Ja vam želim Božji blagoslov dok se budete pripremali za vašu službu.
And remember that the health message is a way in which we can get into the lives and make a difference in those that live around us.
I zapamtite da preko zdravstvene poruke mi možemo da uđemo u život ljudi i da ih približimo k nama.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here, and if you have questions, we can talk about that later, or maybe over lunch. Thank you.
Hvala što ste bili.